Hi everyone, Nathan Craig here with Sunset Auto Wholesale. Going to tell you the history of the company. Let's see here. It starts all the way back to 2004 November is when I got my dealer's license, and I want to say like November 11th for some reason. I remember that date. Today is May 11th, so it's been 13 years and some months. So where my story starts though, it starts ever since I was a little boy. I worked with my father in body shops as a paint prepper, detailer, assistant, whatever he needed ever since I've been able to walk. So I grew up in a shop. Realized after doing that my whole life that I really wanted to do something different when I got older, or something more with my more of my brain instead of my the physical, because that's hard work. My father did that. He's been doing body work since he was 15 years old, and just celebrated his, I believe, his 66th birthday. So he's been doing that a long time, and he's a great example of a father, and also hard worker is where I get my work ethic from. So shout out to you, Dad. Yeah, his birthday was just a couple days ago, so pretty cool. So I grew up in a shop. Started off, I was going to go to college, but I had a fear of debt, so I didn't want to go take on loans for college. So I tried to do running start, didn't pass the classes. Just not a good test taker, and not really a good traditional school guy. So that just wasn't a plan for me. I enjoyed learning, but definitely not in the traditional sense. So I needed a job. So right out of high school, I worked for Alaska Airlines, and I was a warehouse lead. I worked there for, I want to say, 4 months. And I passed my probation, which is either by time or by hours. And so I actually passed it by hours in about 3.5 months. I was working 66 hours in 4 days, to where I could get double time for the other 3 days. So if you worked 8 hours from the time you got off and eight hours from the time you went back to work, you would get double time. So I'd end up getting what they call insufficient rest, and so I'd end up sleeping in my car, fell asleep, driving home, sometimes on the side of the freeway, just to wake up and catch the next exit and go back to work. It's crazy. I was forgetting, days, weeks, months. I took me a day to recover. Is insane, but I was really motivated to, because I wanted to make money and be successful, as I think everybody does, right? So anyways, my father found an ad in the newspaper for, they had newspapers back then. This was, I think, 99, for a interview, or excuse me, for a job in detail. And so I wanted to do something outside the shop and outside of my father's, helping me get a job kind of thing. And other than Alaska, I got that all on my own, but I didn't want to go back to like, hey, Dad, I need some help to get a job, right? So I wanted to do it on my own. So he found this job, so I was like, I'll just go back to what I know. I know how to detail cars. I know how to do that kind of stuff. I'm a hard worker. I'm sure I'll get hired. So I went there, and I dressed up with the nicest clothes I had, which was actually pretty nice: sweater, slacks, something like that, nice shoes, and went in for the interview. And I guess I impressed the guy so much, the used car manager, Dave Spencer. Shout out to you, Dave, if you ever see this. You're a big part of, I don't know I don't know whatever would have happened if I would have found the car business if you didn't put me on that path. Anyways, I had no idea about commission or anything. And I remember, he goes, I want to hire you in sales. And I go, this was how our conversation went down. Hey, so he says, I think you're too smart for a detail. I was like, too smart? What do you mean? He's like, well, I want to hire you in sales. And I'm like, okay. How much do you guys make an hour? And he says, well, it's commission. And I'm like, well, what's commission? And he says, you get the definite commission. You know, obviously, you basically based on what you sell and the profit, you get paid a certain percentage. And so I was like, okay. So how much? You know, how much is that? And he's like, you know, as a typical used car manager, they have kind of low patience. So sorry to any used car managers out there that take this offensively, but used car managers are normally pretty short tempered because they do a lot of different jobs. They don't got a lot of time to waste. He's like, well, so he goes, my worst guy makes $4,000 a month. And so my head like spun around like in the movie The Jerk with Steve Martin when he finds out he got a $250,000 check. He thought it was a $250 check, but it was a $250,000 check, right? So my head like spun around and I was like, well, I've never been the worst at anything. And so he hired me. I was 19, almost 20, I believe. He hired me. Came to work the next day. Actually, I went home, told my mom and my dad, and they told my grandfather, and my grandfather was so impressed that he gave me like in my opinion, the most valuable heirloom that my family had to offer, which, well, at least that mattered to me, which was my Uncle Sonny's Rolex stainless steel Submariner, and it was a big deal to me that my grandfather gave it to me, and you know, that it was my uncle who I'm named after, you know, also who my son is named after. So pretty cool. So I come, you know, now there's expectations, you know, everybody knows. So I come to work and the general manager, Clayton Rushing, he's now passed, and Clayton actually, the story starts out bad but ends good. So he comes up to Dave and he says, hey, he's too young, he'll never be successful. We're not hiring him sales. Well, he already hired me. I was already there. And so he's like, Dave was real apologetic. Well, you can be my assistant, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, you can, you know, I'll teach you stuff. And I was like, hey, you know, I just wanted a job. So it was great. So long story short, I was there like 3 months. And then my father found another ad in the paper, and it was for a salesman at Puyallup Chevrolet Subaru, which is now like Northwest Motorsports. 400 River Road is the address in Puyallup, Washington. And so I went by there, and I was still wearing my detail clothes, and you know, the reason why I did it kind of on a whim, because I was happy where I was at. I enjoyed working for Dave, and I enjoyed working at Mercedes, but it was something just I felt like I needed to do. I was living at home with my parents, and I had to you know, I just felt like it's something I had to do to find out if it's something that I could do, because with that kind of money, that was like game changer money to me. $4,000 a month in 1999 was monster money. It's still a lot of money now. So I went there, and I talked to a guy named Randy Duran, and he was real reluctant to come down out of the sales office, and he comes out to smoke, and he's just like, oh man, you know, some kid here in detail clothes. And so anyhow, he asked me some questions. He's like, man, we're just willing to hire people with experience. And I remember it was like a life moment. I asked him, I said, Randy, I've never failed at anything I've done. Give me a chance. And he gave me a chance. Somehow that worked. I mean, I remember that was one of those things that just spoke from my heart. I was like, just give me a chance. I've never failed at anything. So, you know, so he gave me a chance. Next thing you know, 3 months later, 2 months later, all I did was train. I watched videos. At the time, I would just watch Joe Verdi videos, whatever training the dealership had to offer. And it was one of these things that I just slept, ate, and breathed sales training. So I, let's see here, fast forward, fast forward 2 months, I think I was making $3,000 a month, something like that, $3,500. In my third month there, I fell on my face. I was 2.5 cars out, 3 days left to go in the month, and I'm started questioning everything. Like, is this business really, you know, is this really for me, kind of thing, you know? I did all this training, all this reading, studied on my own, bought books, went to a sales seminar that I paid for, the dealership didn't pay for it, and was really questioning everything. then all of a sudden, well, there's this offsite sale called the Wallop in Puyallup, a big offsite sale at the fairgrounds in Puyallup, Washington. So went there and I just worked my ass off. Well, 2.5 days is a 3-day sale, 4-day sale, something like that. In 2.5 days, I sold 11 cars. And I went from being last place to first place in the dealership, and I beat a guy named Greg Hubner, who is another guy that I just can't thank enough, because that guy took me under his wing, and he hadn't been beaten in like 2 years. It was Greg Hubner for like 2 years on the plaques, and then it was me, Nathan Craig, and then the manager that they had hired at the time that replaced my first manager was really kind of a prick, and so I quit. And so they offered me a demo at where my other manager went, so I followed him, and then they gave me my own schedule, a demo, made me a closer, gave me my own schedule, which was kind of a mistake, because they made a deal with me. As long as I sold 14 cars, I could take off the rest of the month. Well, I did that in 15 days, my 4th month in the car business. And so then I took my time off. And then so fast forward, Dave calls me back and he says, "Hey, Clayton, the manager got fired, the general manager, you want to come sell Mercedes?" And I was like, and I always felt that like high end was where I wanted to be, because I knew if I met people that were where I was at, I could learn things from them by being around them. So I was stoked and just was like, yeah, I'll do it. And so I came back there, worked in sales, and this is like at the time, I think my 6th month or 7th month in the car business, and I met a guy named Ken Rochelle, who was he was the top salesman when I was a lot boy there, and Ken really took me under his wing, and I'm really proud to say that he's one of my sales managers now. And he used to be my sales manager for me back in 2000 through the recession, the hardest time that America's seen in the last 100 years for business, and he managed my company back then as well. And so he really took me under his wing. In fact, when I was a lot boy, he told me a story, or he told me, "The way you're going, one day I'm going to end up working for you." And that motivated me, and it actually something that I put in the back of my mind, and I said, you know what? If I can believe that, anything's possible, and it actually became one of my goals. And so, I wanted to be able to where I could be able to employ people who had taken me under their wing, and it'd be great for me to be able to give back to them too. So, so I was there 2 years. I was always I was 1, 2, or 3 in the dealership between a guy named Ken Rochelle, Jim Foster, and then me. Ken and Jim probably won first place more than I did, being there for sure. I mean, they were strong. I was 21, no excuse. But then I had a great opportunity at BMW Northwest through a friend of a friend, introduced me to those guys, and it just seemed like a better fit as far as the cars and really the company as well. So I went there, and I made a goal for myself that I wanted to save up $100,000, and once I had $100,000, that I would, basically open my own company, because I realized, this is a challenging business. It's hard unless you're building a brand, and at the time the internet wasn't even big at that time, so it's this is all pre-social media and all that stuff, and it was hard to build a brand as a salesperson back then, or at least I didn't know how to. Now it's a lot different. So. Anyways, I worked there. I was their top salesman there. Not my first year, but my 2nd year. And then I was proud of my 2nd year, because I took 2.5 months off, and I still was salesman of the year.